Hi, everybody. You can see my screen. See some eyeballs looking. Okay, excellent. Great. So, hi, my name's Gina. I'm the team leader for the Accelerator Lab Network. Really happy to join you here from New York, where it's 7 in the morning on a Saturday. So great to see you all also on a Saturday. I'm going to just give you a basic understanding of the labs. A lot of this information is on the website, so you might have already seen it. So I'll run through it quickly so that we can focus mainly on your questions today. So this is the team. We have Maria, who's our human resource specialist, myself, and then we have Cal, our communications and partnerships lead. So we'll be on the call today to answer your questions, and we're looking forward to that. So first, just a question on why we're doing this. Essentially, UNDP is a large development organization working in many countries, 170. And what we see is that the pace and complexity of change in the environment is increasing. We don't know the full impacts of artificial intelligence for good or for bad. We see climate events getting more frequent and more intense. We see inequality growing despite economic growth. And we see sort of technological ability to synthetically produce information campaigns that aren't necessarily true. All of this undermines our ability to engage in fact-based discussions on how to make development sustainable, to make economic growth something that also balances out environmental preservation and social well-being. And what we also see, so the line that's shooting up kind of exponentially, that's sort of the external environment. Whereas our approaches in the public sector and in development tend to be this dotted line on the bottom, this current practice line, right? So we may make some impact with a training or with an analysis or with a policy reform, but we're nowhere near keeping up to this incredible change. So this is really where the Accelerator Labs come in. We're meant to, the gap between what we're doing now and this exponential world, we're trying to reduce that gap, basically, to catch up. So maybe we can move to the next slide. So UNDP works in 170 countries. We recently, just last year, have put innovation at the heart of our global strategic plan. So it's now a specific and deliberate objective of that plan. We work with many governments around the world. We are supporting an election every 2 weeks. And we've also been rated highly for value for money by aid data and high in transparency by the Aid Transparency Index. So we're always working to improve both of these factors, but we're proud of the ratings we have so far. Moving now to how the Accelerator Labs are going to work once we set them up. We're looking at basically teams of people that are going to work with government, businesses, civil society, citizens in these countries to solve problems. This is largely, very generically, how they're going to work. When it comes to the advantages that we bring, we're very much focused on accelerating the speed of learning, particularly on these complex challenges. Maybe we can move to the next slide. Particularly on these complex challenges that are very interwoven, right? So normally the rate of learning tends to be every year you would do an analysis and you would do some reflection. I think tacitly we do analysis and reflection and learning all the time. We're trying to make it explicit and explicitly faster than an annual basis. So we're trying to bridge that gap a bit. When it comes to what kinds of solutions we're proposing, we really want to open up the field much larger and balance the development expertise that our organization has with the solutions that are coming from people themselves. They're closest to the problem. They've probably figured out ways of solving it that we would never imagine, and we really want to learn from that. And lastly, we think that what we offer as a global organization that works very closely with government and national partners, that we think we have a comparative advantage when it comes to scaling social innovation, because we have this partnership route to handing over solutions to others who can take them forward. So you've seen probably the 3 roles that we're hiring. We're looking at heads of exploration, solutions mapping, and experimentation. The heads of exploration are really sort of, horizon scanners, right? People who are looking for new sources of data, looking for new trends, looking for new partners, just constantly having a, sort of extroverted focus so that our organization can keep learning and adapt. The heads of solution mapping are meant to find people who are solving their own problems. They may be farmers who've found more efficient ways to withstand annual flooding. They might be people living with certain diseases. They might be people coping with specific problems who just have found a solution because they need to, and neither the sort of private sector market is solving their problem, nor is our public services, so they just get on with it and solve it themselves. The heads of solution mapping are going to look for those people, look for those innovators, those grassroots innovators. And lastly, the head of experimentation is going to build a balanced portfolio of different kinds of techniques to address one problem. This person is going to integrate ethical concerns into the design of a portfolio of experiments, and they're going to be able to look at the different methods that are in play and see how they work together, and how they're solving a problem or failing to solve the problem. So these are the 3 roles that we're hiring. What we'd like to do in general with these accelerator labs is really advance the field of sustainable development, right? We know at this point that sustainable development particularly does not relate only to the income of people or countries, right? We see a lot of economic growth that isn't equally distributed, and we know this is a challenge. When it comes to solving these problems, we kind of get stuck a little bit in sort of expert-driven policy reforms. We get stuck in the idea that one single solution is going to solve these complex challenges, which are very interconnected. And we do constantly, despite the advances of having communication channels as open as they are, we're still kind of learning in isolation and relearning the mistakes other people have made. We're looking towards moving to a faster learning cycle, right? Where we're not just collecting data every year or every 3 years and then figuring out what to do about it. We're looking at more like, weekly/monthly. And we're looking for this approach that doesn't imagine one solution is going to solve a multitude of environmental, social, and economic problems. We're looking at rather a portfolio of potential solutions that allows us to hold different ideas in parallel, experiment with them, learn from them, learn how they interact, and go from there. And lastly,
Thanks
go ahead. Sorry. Just lastly, we're looking for much more real-time information in terms of how the world around us is changing, and looking to diversify the sources of that information.
Thanks so much, Gina. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to pass it over to Maria. Maria is our HR specialist, and she'll be able to answer a number of the questions you folks asked. So Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Gina, and hello, everybody. So after, I think, this dive into the exciting work of the Accelerator Labs, I think that you may have picked up on the fact that we're not necessarily looking for the more traditional kind of profile that UNDP usually attracts and hires. We're indeed, of course, interested in getting candidates who are who have a good foundation, but we also want them to be open to discovery, to be creative, to be pragmatic and pragmatic and constructive and comfortable with ambiguity and technologically savvy. And along these same lines, There's no requirement, no need for the candidates to neither know someone in the UN or UNDP or have any previous experience or work in familiarity with the UN system or UNDP specifically. If you have it, we still want to, of course, know about you, but just to say that it's not indispensable. We still want to get to know you and see what you've got to offer. Even if you don't bring that part of it, that's not relevant for these accelerator lab positions. Speaking of what is and what isn't relevant, having the nationality of the country where the accelerator lab positions are being advertised, that is a requirement. You will have seen, if not, you will see that most of these positions are offered as national officer positions. National officer positions are open for nationals of the country in question. Two exceptions to this: Fiji and Barbados. In those two country offices, we are also advertising or instead of NOB, we're advertising international UN volunteer positions, which means they're open to anybody, for anybody to apply. Now, specifically, Fiji and Barbados, I said, these are the exception, but specifically for national officer positions, and those are positions in most of our accelerator lab positions. We, as I said, we're looking for nationals of the country. It's not enough to have a permanent residence. It's not enough to have a work permit. You need to be a national of the country. What is not necessary is that you live currently in the country, although if selected, you will need to move to the country. There's no working remotely from a different country for these positions. Now, speaking of requirements and must-haves, you may have seen in our vacancy announcements that we have requirements for these jobs, such as having a bachelor's or a master's degree, for example. Nationality is an obvious minimum requirement that I just tapped on. But for the most part, you will see that what we're asking for is more desired skills or competencies that would be an added asset. Why I'm talking on this? Because I want you to please apply as long as you have the minimum requirements and as long as you're interested in these positions. Do apply. Do not just say, look, I don't have most of the desired or even half of the desired, and so I'm not going to be considered. You are going to be considered. We are open to a number of different mix and match of profiles. So as long as you meet the minimum requirements and you're interested, do apply. Whether you need to, you could apply to one or more positions, it is absolutely up to you, and it will not be detrimental for the organization to consider your application, whether you've applied for only one or all three or just two of the positions. That is absolutely up to you, and it will have no bearing on how the organization will consider your application. You will also see that our minimum requirements are rather low. This is not because these are considered to be junior positions. This is only because we wanted to remove any barrier to, or not remove, but reduce any barrier to entry. So obviously the lower the minimum requirements, the wider the pool of candidates that we can tap on. So I insist, if you're interested and meets the minimum requirements, do apply. We want to hear about you and from you. Just one last point. We have had questions before about benefits and allowances. These are public, this is public information for the UN. You can find it online, and we will be sharing on the chat box the URL, the link to the website, the UN website, where you can find this information. So over to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Maria. And if you could just send that URL to me, I'll post it into the box. Our most popular question is actually for you, Maria. What stages and steps can the candidates expect to go through during the recruitment process, and what is your general timeline for filling the different positions?
Thank you. So obviously application needs to be sent before the deadline. You can edit the application until the deadline. If you do edit the application after you've submitted it, make sure to resubmit. If you submit and then edit and do not hit resubmit, we will not be able to consider you because it will be showing as draft. So do make sure that whatever you edit, you then resubmit to make sure that we receive your application. Now, timelines. We're looking to May as the month in which the offers will be sent out to the selected candidates. So we have deadlines. You will have seen that most of the vacancies have a deadline around 4th of March. It's not the case for all of them. So when I say May, mid-May, I'm talking about on average, depending on the country office, vacancies will have been posted for longer or shorter, or will have a later on deadline or not. So that will also play, of course, into our timeline. But May would be around the time between now and May for the recruitment process. The different stages, what you can expect is definitely an interview, and most likely, and I will not get into details for obvious reasons, but most likely an assignment or a test or some sort of assessment in addition to the interview. In any case, selected candidates that are shortlisted for these assessments, the assessment or the interview. By assessment, I mean the test or assignment. They will be contacted ahead of time, giving them enough time to prepare. The expectation is you should hear from us. You should hear back from us if you're one of these shortlisted candidates moving forward in the process. You should hear from us sometime in March, towards the second half of March, or I would say, or around mid-March. Yeah, I think I covered it. Did I miss something? Good.
Thanks, Maria. So our next one is from Christian, who asks, when discussing about the staff for labs, are we only going to be 3 people, or are we expected to build a team of explorers, designers, and experimenters?
Let me take that one. So yes, you should definitely build a team. I think you need to be a bit creative about how you do so, right? We're only hiring 3 full-time staff. So so we need to kind of think about how we create collaborative environments that allow people to participate, even if they're not full-time participants, right? So we're going to be working through partnership a lot, working through co-design, etc. These kinds of methods are going to help you build a team. These should be something fun that people are excited about doing, but we're only hiring 3 full-time staff.
Great. Jose asks, could you speak in more detail about how the Accelerator Labs will be placed within the country office architecture and the dynamic that you expect with the country teams?
So the 3 Accelerator Lab staff are going to report to senior management. That's a reporting line that we've set up. And it's really important that these Accelerator Labs work closely with the UNDP country office, right? The idea here is not to create a special siloed team that sort of works in its own space and then can't interact with the larger program, the country program that's underway by UNDP, right? Which is a partnership between UNDP and national partners and a promise on our part to deliver for the people of a given country. So it's really important that we are integrated with the country office and definitely with the country team as well, looking broader to the UN and working very, very closely in partnership with government and businesses and civil society.
Thanks, Gina. Andrea asks, how are you planning to operationally integrate these 60 teams? Is it through weekly meetings or any plan to have a common internal platform to share information between them?
Both. Yeah, we have both already up and running with the UNDP country offices that are setting up the labs, both weekly meetings and a platform.
Awesome. Christian asks, what kind of toolkit of methods is UNDP investing in? Will there be a space for participatory and human-centered design practices?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're looking broadly here at, you know, the sort of wide universe and ever-changing universe of social innovation, right? So looking at new sources of data, data innovation, predictive analytics, behavioral insights, innovative finance, certainly collective intelligence methods, so integrating technology and participatory methods. All of these are on the table and more that I don't know about.
Andres asks, is this something that I can lead according to my initiatives, or is there any specific topic that PNUD is looking for here in Colombia?
Right. So I think we do want to rely on a lot of initiative from the Accelerator Lab teams. So if you were to be selected as part of the team, we would rely on your initiative. But that comes with a caveat, right? This is not a startup of sort of your own business, right? You'd be working within a United Nations organization, which is a global organization, which has people from all over the world and people with multiple expertises and multiple roles, right? So we can't sort of run completely out of the range of our finance rules, for example, or the legal framework we operate under, or, you know, the human resource procedures, or even the procurement rules. So we do operate within that, and we need people who both have this initiative, but who are willing to sort of work through a system approach to bring change. That's really important.
Someone writes, I love the ambiguity and freedom of it all. The position I applied to is listed as a one-year engagement. What are the criteria for extension?
Yes, so in UNDP, the one-year contract for fixed term appointment, which is the kind of appointment that we use for a year, for commitments that are expected to last at least 1 year. The one-year contract is the common practice. Now, you will see, if you're the selected candidate and you're hired, you will be given a letter of appointment, which is how we call the contract, the employment contract. You will see that at some point in the document it says that there's no expectation of renewal. Now, that said, as long as the structure remains, the position is considered to still be necessary and relevant. There is funding, the person is performing well and remains satisfied and wants to stay. There's no reason why I cannot think of any reason why it wouldn't be extended. But it has to it has to be dependent on all these variables.
Thanks. Gina, did you want to add anything to that? Okay, great. Our next question is, will Accelerator Labs be expected to devise action plans for SDGs or to facilitate the collaboration on designing such measures?
Definitely. I mean, certainly as the UN Development Program, we are charged with helping governments achieve the goals that they set in 2015. So that, you know, the clock is a bit running out on these incredibly ambitious goals. So we do want to focus a good number of the solutions created by the Accelerator Lab on the Sustainable Development Goals.
Someone asks, I would like to know if the head of solutions mapping has to perform field research, or is he or she only conducting, only manage a field research team?
I think that we're looking for self-starters here. So again, there's not a plan for a large team of field researchers in place. You would have funding at your disposal so you could hire short-term field researchers. But again, we do need to kind of find people who can find solutions even when, you know, you might not have the full team that you wish you had. So we need to sort of accomplish the goals of the position, which are to learn what's out there, what kind of coping mechanisms and practices are out there that help sustainable development, but to do so in a way that's creative and making use of volunteers and partners, etc.
Thanks. Could you describe a day in the life of the head of solutions mapping?
Sure. So this might be, let's say you wake up and you're going to go out to, I don't know, drive in the car for a couple hours out to a rural area to talk to some farmers about what they've been doing and how they've been coping with climate events and flooding and other environmental impacts on their farms. So you would learn from them, learn from the practices they're doing. You would get back in the car, come back in, then you might be going to a meeting with, let's say, the Ministry of Agriculture in this case, to talk about the kind of wisdom that you found out there and the good practices and the challenges that they're having. And then you may have some meetings as well with UNDP teams to look at, you know, our disaster risk reduction programs. How are we building on those local solutions? And that would be sort of, you know, a big day.
Absolutely. Kristen asks, will the lab team get training opportunities to further our understanding of practices for the job?
Yes. Yes, you will.
Within each country lab, we tap into the innovation network or social entrepreneurship initiative in the country.
Yes, it's really, really key. So one of the things that we're asking our teams to do now is sort of map the innovation ecosystem in country, right? And of course, this is it needs to be a recurrent practice because you can't just do it once and then it's done because it's changing all the time. But really, really important that we build on what's already there, add to it, maybe even connect a little bit of it up so that it's we're sharing lessons and scaling the things that need to be scaled.
The target solutions, Samantha asks, the target solutions of these labs, would they be civil society-based solutions, UN-based solutions, local government solutions, or all types of solutions?
Really all types. You know, they might be something that is sort of like an individual entrepreneur. They might be things that are sort of community responses. They may be solutions that are, yeah, just it's a range of things. I think in most cases, you know, when we're finding these amazing grassroots innovators, they're going to be working in a community in some way or shape. So the focus is not so much on like the individuals, but rather how they connect to their wider community and what kind of impact they're having.
Pilly asks, define success. Do we have metrics such as traction metrics or maybe financial growth metrics that we look at?
Yes, great question. So we don't have that level of specificity yet. I mean, I think what we're looking for are accelerator labs that are going to use these various approaches, right? New sources of data, finding local grassroots innovations, managing different portfolios of experience. And the key thing we're after here is the ability to learn about what works in addressing complex issues in the environment, right? Issues that are interconnected, that are so-called wicked problems, very, very hard to solve. They've not been solved yet. So the learning itself and the intelligence we gather there is a major output and a key indicator that we're trying to track. We will, over time, be looking at sustainability issues as well, and definitely the scaling factor, though the scaling does not always happen in sort of financial terms. It may also be scaling to impact the regulatory environment, impact the policy framework, etc.
Great. Camilla asks, will UNDP aim to integrate these solutions or projects with national policy development to increase sustainability?
Definitely, definitely. So that's why we think UNDP is well placed for running an accelerator lab network, which has a chance to spread the ideas into governments because we work so closely with governments.
Is there a plan to move from experimentation to large-scale implementation? And if so, what is the deadline to worthwhile solutions?
What is the deadline to?
generate worthwhile solution, or solution could be taken to a large scale.
Sorry, you're cutting out, Cal, but I think the question is sort of, are we looking to scale? And if so, what's the kind of time period? More or less. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, definitely. I mean, let's say this. Obviously, we're looking for solutions, and we'll be testing out new methods that we hope would have a bigger impact, right? Our ultimate mission as UNDP is to help governments achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and get the world on a more sustainable, equitable path for economic growth. That's broadly our mission, supported by democratic governance, of course. So yes, we're looking to scale. In terms of the time period, that's very hard to answer. I think one thing we do know is we're trying to speed up the cycle of learning so that it's a much faster learning cycle. How things scale and how long they take to scale and what scaling looks like is a much more complex question that depends on context. So it could be that scaling means, you know, some people think of scaling as sort of replicating a solution that was maybe in one municipality and, you know, doing it multiple places. There are others who say, you know, that doesn't work in the social sector because we're not running a factory here and social issues are complex and they really depend on context. So it's not that we're going to, you know, copy paste this thing and put it everywhere. It's going to adapt and change and look different in every different place. And then there's, of course, the whole, you know, sort of idea of scaling up, as they call it, meaning influencing the policy framework, the incentive systems. So all of those are different avenues for scale, and they would be on different timelines. But everyone always is interested in scale when it comes to innovation. So it's definitely a target and something we'll be working on.
Maria asks, will funding give at the disposal of the team to support contracting assistance and other kinds of services or input?
There will be funding available to the team, but I would be hesitant to say this would be spent on administrative assistance. I think we're really looking for people who are ready to you know, sort of carry their own luggage, as it were. That's kind of our the way we work in the UN. Many of us sort of need to, you know, you're going to need to do. Everyone at many levels is going to have to do some administrative things just to get things done. So there will be a budget for programming, but we would probably want to see the labs spending more money on a portfolio of experiments than administrative assistance.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that would look like? What do you see the lab spending that budget on?
So it may be, you know, it may be getting some specialized expertise. So maybe there's some machine learning expertise that you need, then you don't have in-house and you need to contract out. It may be, you know, sort of planning an event where you bring people together and work collaboratively to review some analysis and make a plan going forward. Those would be sort of, you know, some of the expenses that you might phone. So more like project expenses that put something into action rather than supporting the staff of the lab.
Great. Is there any kind of prioritization of problems that the lab will tackle first, i.e. problems that are directly related to the 2030 agenda?
Good question. So right now we're working with all of the 60 UNDP country offices, and the assignment they have is very much geared to identifying where the focus of the lab will be first. So this is going to be determined locally, nationally, in terms of what they work on. And then we're going to connect up within the network to join up different lab teams that are working on similar subjects or working on adjacent subjects or working on totally different subjects, but in the same, using the same methods. So that's largely the idea.
N asks, when do you expect the launch of the country-specific accelerator labs to happen? Do you have a rollout plan for each country?
Good question. So we're doing the recruitment now. So right now we're doing two two things. We've launched this recruitment process, and we hope that this is concluded by June, so that we can kick off training events and designing work of the labs. So that's the timeline there. Meanwhile, we're working with the UNDP country offices to do some of the analysis to get ready for the new lab team members to come on board. And so that when they come on board, the environment is sort of ripe for them to succeed.
Great. Colombia and Argentina posts don't state that the candidates have to be a national when other countries do, like Ecuador. Can any national apply to them?
Sorry, no. It is true that not every country office has stated so, but this is a blanket requirement. It's not dependent on each country office. It's not that UNDP can decide, okay, for this these countries, national offices are open for anybody, and these other national officers are not. It's a blanket requirement for all national officer positions across the board. They're only open to nationals of the country in question.
And Maria, we have a couple of questions around who makes the decision around employment and who does the shortlisting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so usually national officer position recruitments are conducted locally by the country office. In this case, the project team is having a lot to say on how recruitment is conducted, how assessments are conducted, what are the long list and short listing assessment criteria, methodologies to be used and such. So at the very end, the final decision will rest with the country office. The final selection decision will rest with the country office. But until we get there, there are many stages that will be picked out by the project team with the regional bureaus or headquarter offices. Some other stages will be done jointly with the country offices. But ultimately, the final decision, the decision on what candidate to put forward for what position and have that endorsed by our internal mechanisms will rest with the country office.
Andrea asks, how do the UNDP Accelerator Labs connect what they're working on with the current approaches of the country program, and who does the lab team report to?
Okay, so on who the lab team reports to, the lab team reports to senior management. So that is the UNDP resident representative or the UNDP deputy deputy resident representative. So that's the reporting line. And sorry, Cal, the other question was?
The other question has to do with how does what the labs do connect to the country program?
Aha, right. Excellent question, and really something we're working very hard on right now, even before the lab teams are put in place. So we're basically asking the teams to have a look at their current country program vis-a-vis this changing environment that we're talking about, and see where it lines up and where the mismatch is. So we want the Accelerator Lab teams to come in and target specific sort of unsolved issues or issues that have changed a lot over time that the current UNDP country program is not quite solving in its current design. So we very much want these to be related. We hope the Accelerator Labs expand on the UNDP country program, but also reinforce it.
Christian asks, is the Accelerator Lab team in charge of identifying funding sources for solutions, or are we able to count on funding that already is in place to invest in local solutions?
There will be a funding allocation from the global project. But that being said, additional funds can always be raised locally as well to expand on that.
One person asks, most of the countries listed earlier are massive. What is your experience or expectations on launching this type of work in a country, countrywide all at once?
Great question. Absolutely great question. I mean, I think that let's see, let's pick apart this question in parts. One thing is to say that increasingly it is a trend for our work to, in order for it to really have impact, we need to we need to be working at the subnational level, right? At the provincial level, at the municipal level, at the regional level, etc. This is something that we see, especially with energy solutions. Many sort of sustainable development issues happen at the municipal level, right? They're the ones who are in charge of waste management, for example, or water provision or what have you. So that's a critical point. That being said, our partners, we tend to be also at the ministerial level, at the national level. So the idea would be we would kind of be able to test out things in certain municipalities, link that back up to national policy and the national goals of the National Development Plan, and see how the country's doing on the Sustainable Development Goal achievement. So it would happen in multiple places. But obviously, you know, in large countries, you're right. You know, a small accelerator lab is not going to, you know, be able to sort of drive solutions in every possible environmental, social, economic, or democratic governance area. But this is something that we're hoping that we're bridging across the silos, bridging across disciplines, across sectors, so that we get to that critical kind of spot that actually triggers benefits in multiple areas.
Gustavo had a question, I guess, about the gender balance of hiring, and to what extent are women in particular privileged to work as to be hired into these positions?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Actually, noting that the tendency, and I'm not speaking only about UNDP, but in general, that the tendency is to privilege often and most often unconsciously men. There's no clear intention to do some sort of affirmative action to privilege women, but we do want to remove any unconscious biases that would push us to hire men over women with the same qualifications. So we do want, we would like to strive for a gender balanced accelerator labs. Hard to balance it when you have 3 positions and 2 main genders, obviously, but we do want to have both men and women in all accelerator labs. So in some, we'll have maybe 2 men, 1 woman, and some others 2 women, 1 man, but we do strive to have both represented, absolutely.
One person asks, can UNDP embrace rapid testing, failure, and course correction?
That is definitely the idea. That we, you know, part of the sort of exploration function, the head of exploration function, is to be able to tap into new data sources that are more closer to real time, right? So that only has value if you use that data to actually do course correction. And in my experience, this is actually the hard part. You know, it's challenging enough to prove that that, let's say, you can use financial transaction data to assess recovery after a hurricane. That's one step in the process. Then getting decision makers to act based on that data, right? To channel resources to the areas that are slower in recovery, which you know by the fact that the financial transaction rate is still lower. That's really the hard part. And I think that cuts across many public sector organizations.
Pili asks, is the lab an incubator for undiscovered grassroots projects, or is it more an accelerator for ongoing solutions, or is it both?
Excellent question. I think it's more of an accelerator than an incubator, but it is also a little bit of an incubator, especially when it comes to kind of testing out new methods of data gathering and testing out new methods within the portfolio of experiments.
Great. We have a question about how the accelerator labs will share their knowledge and have it disseminated amongst the 60 teams, and I guess how these labs work together globally.
Great question. So we're really going to focus on this. So the idea of using some agile management practices to help that. We're also looking at working out loud, where you kind of tell a story of what you're doing even while you're doing it, even before you're sure that what you're doing is the right way or the right thing, but you're actually asking for advice and kind of crowdsourcing as you go. So that's really, really key in terms of process. We will connect with the lab teams on a very regular basis. The global team is completely at the disposal of the country teams. That's what we're here for. And yeah, we'll have the communication platform. We'll have regular meetings. We really do want to kind of put into practice this promise of creating the world's fastest, largest learning network that requires a level of connectivity, a level of exchange, honest exchange that we haven't yet achieved.
We have a couple of questions from people wondering if additional accelerator labs will be launched in the future, and if your country is not listed in the drop-down menu on the website, does that mean that there are no positions available in that country?
So we very much hope we would expand the network. Right now, we've kind of got our hands full with 60. Truth be told, this is a big. But the idea indeed is that we test this out. We continue to move and work with partners and see where the opportunity is, and to grow as we go forward. If you don't see your country in the dropdown, that means that there isn't a lab there right now.
Carlos asks, would the participants have any kind of support from UNDP to contract or establish relationships with different stakeholders? And I guess here to also be useful to define maybe what participants could mean.
What participants could mean in the sense of?
Well, so this question, we could use participants in one of two ways. Participants could be the staff of the labs. So that's one sense of participant. And another sense of participant is maybe if you're thinking about this like a more traditional accelerator, participants might be the people who are the solution originators.
So definitely, we see these labs working as part of the UNDP country office. That is clear. So that would be so we want the labs to be, let's say, accelerating the closing of this relevance gap we talk about, right, between traditional methods and the exponential environment. But to do so in partnership and in collaboration with our economists, our environmental experts, our social equality experts, our governance experts, etc. I think that's it. Sorry, I don't understand the participant angle of the question, other than to say we're largely going to be working in partnership quite a bit, and we're very much looking to invite participation into our work in a way that's bigger and more open than we have in the past.
And that kind of linkage is supported by the UNDP country office.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. We have a few questions around level of English and how high does it need to be. For example, someone asked, can I apply for the vacancy if my English is intermediate or intermediate high?
Yes, well, that would depend on what country you're applying for. If the language used in if the working language used in the country that you're applying for is English, then yeah, the requirement for a higher level of English would be there. If the country is an it's a Spanish-speaking country, or French or Arabic-speaking country, then in that sense, level of English is important, because obviously we do need one language to be able to communicate across the network of the Accelerator labs. Much of our communication with headquarters is in English, with our central offices are in English. So you would need to have a good enough level of English to be able to engage in communications with all these different partners within the organization. But as I said, if the language of the country, if the working language, if the main working language in the country that you're applying for is not English, and you do speak fluently that other language. English is not, you don't need to be fluent, bilingual, trilingual with English. In any case, for specific language requirements, do check out the vacancy announcements online. Different country offices have even either put English as required or it's desirable. And then again, it also will play out, as I said, even if it's required, it might not be required at the same level. It would depend on where the country office is located and what the main language, working language is in the place.
Great. We have a number of people who've asked on that note, should the application be done in the local language or in English?
English, please. As mentioned, there are different people that will be involved in the recruitment process, and at the headquarters and at regional level. Let me take that back. English, please. Preferably in English, but if you are able to submit a much better application in French or Spanish, and if the required language for that position is either French or Spanish, for example, you may do that. We will obviously then, it will have an impact on how we organize the assessment and such. So preferably in English, but there is an option for French and Spanish. I would put the limitations there because I'm also aware of our language skills, level of availability among our staff. So of course we have people that speak all the very many different languages of the world, but we wouldn't want for one same long list to have to use 3 different people because we've got 4 different languages used. So that's obviously not efficient. So preferably in English, but depending on where you're applying for, in Spanish and or French, not and or French would also be an option.
Thanks. Eric asks, in order to have an impact, how are the labs expected to do the authorities from countries like Mexico?
The question is, how are the labs expected to work with authorities in country, like in Mexico? Yeah, absolutely, good. So conversations with national or municipal government, depending on the case, are already underway through the UNDP country offices. So in setting up an accelerator lab, the teams are talking to national partners on the ground already, and we would definitely. We would see it that we would sort of agree at a high level on the objectives of some of the work of the lab. We would touch base, hopefully frequently, with our government partners on what the plans are and kind of co-create with them. And then we would look back at the results that come from different, experiments in the portfolio and see what we can learn. But it's really important that this is a close and a working relationship, and one that sort of identifies the direction, but allows some flexibility in how we get there.
Great. And so we're going to take only 2 last questions because we are kind of running to the end of the hour. Now our second last question is from Christian. Is the lab expected to or allowed to engage in collaboration with and publishing of results in academia and scientific venues?
Definitely. Yes, of course. That would be great.
Great. And for our last question, Gina, a number of people have asked, if they're not selected for the position, for example, or, if they don't have an accelerator lab in their country, how can they participate or how can they contribute?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. I think it's important to, we're sort of blasting this recruitment out wide to send a message about what we're doing. And in the end, we're hiring 180 people, which is a lot, but not, a lot in global terms. So we really do want to be working with you all, regardless of what happens through this process. So I think the best way is through the UNDP country offices in the labs that you are keen to work with. We would hope that the accelerator labs would set up kind of similar formats to this one. Many of them already have, certainly for the recruitment process, but on a regular basis, sharing results of research, sharing new ideas, brainstorming sessions. We would see the labs as a place that invites participation on a regular basis, but does so to solve a particular problem. So I would keep an eye out on various social media for calls for participation. They will come probably more like in the summer, is my guess, not sooner than that, because right now we're just getting things off the ground. But definitely keep an eye out there, and there's a lot that can be done.
Thanks, Gina. And just one thing to add to that also, if you have thoughts on how you'd like to contribute, or thoughts on how you'd like to partner with the labs, if you go to the Accelerator Labs website and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see there's a section where you can kind of leave a note to say that you're interested. And that we're compiling for each of the countries so that we can keep track of all of the indications of interest for partnering. So that's another way that you can kind of leave your contact info. So love the question. This has been a really great session. There has been a huge amount of participation. I think we've received well over 100 questions as part of this session. Thank you so much for participating. We do hope that we see your applications in the system and that you do go ahead and finish up those applications. That's one. Two is if you know other people who might be interested, or other people in other countries that you think might like to apply, please do share this. We're trying to build some really great teams with some really great talent as part of the Accelerator Labs, and we can use all of the help that we can get. Now, again, thank you so much, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. If you have questions that we haven't answered, we're going to leave an email here in the chat. It's acceleratorlab.labs@undp.org, and we'll do our best to get to any of the questions that we did not manage to answer. So there you go, it's in the chat, and thanks